Story 1. Can we please stop nominating and electing people in their 80s? Story 2. For more than 100 years, most elections have turned on basic economic arguments. Many voters switched from Donald Trump to Joe Biden because of the coronavirus disease 2019 disruptions to jobs and the economy. They switched back to Donald Trump hoping he would magically make prices lower. They are now starting to turn away from Donald Trump because prices have not fallen and the job market is weakening. Like it or not, most Americans vote based on what they perceive will benefit their finances, regardless of accuracy or broader social impacts. To answer the original poster, no, Bernie Sanders would almost certainly not have won. The chance was close to zero. Story 3. I honestly do not know at this point. As a longtime union shop steward trying to convince union members of his merits, I encountered a withering amount of pushback arguing that socialism is evil. There are many starry-eyed young people who do not have a good grasp of rank-and-file people or how thoroughly they have been conditioned against anything with even a whiff of socialism. There was also a problem with bog-standard liberals, especially women at the time, who were alienated more by his fan base than by him. His supporters did him no favors with that group. There was a problem with minorities, specifically black voters, who generally saw him as the expression of cranky white people upset that capitalism was harming them like everyone else on the margins. They did not believe the young, overwhelmingly white supporters had any authentic desire for change or justice. These are significant issues that would have affected turnout. I do not know how it would have turned out, but I do not think he would have won. Story 4. I do not know. There is no way to know. Bernie Sanders benefited from not being the target of many right-wing attacks. Conservatives saw Hillary Clinton, and later Joe Biden, as their likely opponents in the general election and were happy to let the Sanders campaign run against both without interference. If Sanders had become the nominee on either occasion, they would have turned everything they had on him. That would have completely changed the race in ways we cannot guess because he never faced any of that. Sanders was never tested against the propaganda machine, and we do not know how he would have handled it. Story 5. Despite all the criticism of Trump, and I am not defending him in any way, he was very smart about targeting rural Republican areas. He won decisively. He energized those voters, and that helped propel him to victory twice. Unless the Democrats want to get serious and play ball, it is going to be the same thing for a while. Story 6. People loved Bernie because Republicans did not view him as a threat and thus spent no time attacking him. If he had been the nominee, the right-wing machine would have gone after him with full force, with so much ammunition since he was actually a socialist, and all the conservatives who had previously liked him would have stopped supporting him. People always want to compare Hillary's and Bernie's numbers, but it is apples and oranges, since Hillary's numbers reflected the Republican campaign against her while Bernie's did not. Story 7. I'm going against the grain here. He would have won. People just didn't like Hillary. She didn't inspire most people to vote. I voted against Trump, not for her. Did Bernie have policies further to the left? Yes. Some voters would have refused to support a candidate perceived as too far left. So where would he gain votes compared to Hillary? First, he energized people in a way Hillary did not and would have increased turnout on the left. Second, few people personally dislike him. Voters may disagree with his policies, but many respect him, so fewer left-leaning voters would stay home out of personal dislike. Third, some people vote for the most interesting candidate regardless of policy. They vote on personality and vibe. Bernie would have attracted many of those voters compared to Hillary. Fourth, he would have faced less purely oppositional voting. Many people voted against Hillary. Bernie's personal likability and the fact that he is a man would have reduced some of that opposition from sexist voters. In short, he would have lost some centrists on policy, gained some from the left, picked up voters because of personality, and faced less opposition voting. I believe that would have been enough for him to beat Trump. Story 8. Oh, absolutely. In an alternate timeline, Bernie won in 40 states, legalized free puppies, abolished Mondays, and we are all living in solar-powered utopias. Meanwhile, this timeline is whatever it is. Story 9. I have said this and been routinely criticized by locals. Bernie would never have come close to victory in Wisconsin. Outside Dane County, parts of Milwaukee, and nostalgic parts of Green Bay, the word socialist is toxic. Story 10. My family in rural areas turned out to vote for Hillary Clinton after they were terrified of Bernie Sanders. The messaging that socialists would turn the United States of America into the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics was very effective for people old enough to remember it, whether it was fair or not. Story 11. He would have been called a commie Jew a million times by Republicans. Story 12. He was hugely popular with young people, especially Reddit users, but had no chance of winning a nationwide election in 2016. People who voted for Donald Trump instead of Hillary Clinton were not going to vote for a candidate further to the left than her. Story 13-0. All the Republican Party would have needed was to play Bernie's greatest hits on television to beat him easily. The average American would have voted for Republicans after hearing Bernie praise the Soviet breadlines and Hugo Chavez and his regime. It would have made the Mondale election look like a close one. Story 14. I don't think the chance is zero, but I don't think it was very likely. I think enough moderates would have been scared to vote for him and he would have lost. The youth turnout would have had to be very large. Story 15. Trump would have beaten Bernie in a landslide, and I say that honestly as someone who likes Bernie. Trump and Bernie at times had similar messages. The system is broken, I am the one who can fix it, and your party is not doing anything for you. Trump said that to the Republican Party, and he was right. Many rural and non-college working-class people supported Republicans for decades and received little in return. They became poorer and lost jobs, so they were ready to take a chance. You tell that to a Democrat after 2 terms of Obama and they thought you were crazy. Obama was not perfect, but we had 8 years of him basically doing what he promised. The Democratic Party did not need a savior from the outside. I think the Republican Party wanted Bernie to run and went easy on him during the primaries. If he had been the nominee, they would have gone ballistic on the socialism issue. Bottom line, Bernie did not have the votes to win the Democratic primary. There was no way he would have pulled enough Republican votes away from Trump to win, and I think many independents would have stayed home, even more than stayed home for Hillary. Story 16. If you cannot win a primary election, you cannot win a general election. Story 17. Very near zero. He had trouble getting 40% of Democratic primary voters. A non-religious Jewish candidate was not going to get votes from the kind of people who voted for Trump. He would have lost in a landslide. Story 18. I find it odd that many progressives complain endlessly about our old white male politicians, but are obsessed with Bernie, who is basically a cadaver at this point. Story 19. He couldn't beat Hillary. There was a reason the Make America Great Again supporters wanted Bernie. Most polls saying Bernie would have won came during Trump's term, after everyone knew what they were getting into. Story 20. Sanders could never gain that much support across the party. It is interesting how people filter information. One reply says he would not get public support. Another says the establishment would not back him. Neither considers that both could be true, and that either could deny him the ability to take office. Story 21. Most of me thinks he likely would have lost despite how excited many people were. It is possible he could have won, but I do not think that was likely. Ultimately, thought exercises like this are pointless because here we are. Story 22. We will never know. The Republican Party would have had a field day with his past, but he was specifically appealing to the same grievances that Donald Trump tapped into, not from the back of a golden elephant his father had bought him. So who knows? It would have been as much of a gamble as Hillary Clinton or Kamala Harris. What do less educated, propagandized, conservative white Christians fear most? Women, black people, or Jewish people? The answer is obviously Muslims. Story 23. What about when Al Gore lost to George W. Bush? It seems like the economy was good then. Story 24. I think the bigger question is, how would Congress and the country as a whole be doing if both parties actually listened to their constituents? Story 25. I'm tired of questions like this. We don't know how it would have turned out because it didn't happen. Could have been good or bad. We need to stop dwelling on what could have been and focus on what could be. Story 26. Not a chance. I would not have voted for Bernie Sanders then, and I will not vote for Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez in 2028 either. Both politicians are too far left. Story 27. Many Democrats could have beaten Trump in either election. Bernie Sanders was not one of them. Democrats who want to win elections must leave progressive echo chambers and engage independent voters. Story 28. I joined the Democratic Party after being an independent who had voted mostly Republican my whole life, so I could vote for Bernie in the primary. I would have voted for him in 2024 if given the option. Story 29. Elizabeth Warren could have done it in 2016 if she had wanted to. Story 30. I vote straight blue, but this country isn't going to elect a woman or a gay man anytime soon. Democrats have to get someone else lined up or we will lose again. Story 31. We are a little busy right now fighting to get our country back. We will respond to your questions about historical events as soon as we are done. Story 32. I cannot say for certain, but I believe we would not be in this mess as much as we are now. Story 33. I think once Team Trump focused on Bernie, he would have been demolished. Hillary had spent years building an incredible coalition of supporters and the full Democratic establishment, but Trump found a way to disparage her. I do not think anyone would have been ready or able to deflect his attacks. It was too new for the times, and now, thanks to him, it is the status quo. Story 34. Supporters of Make America Great Again do not think about what they could get. They are obsessed with what could be taken from the people they do not like. Story 35. I think Bernie Sanders would have beaten Donald Trump. Many Sanders supporters did not vote for Hillary Clinton. How many voted for Trump or stayed home is unknown. In many states, write-in votes are not counted unless the candidate is pre-approved. Therefore, we may never know how many write-in votes he received. However, there is enough circumstantial evidence to suggest there were a few 100,000. Looking at places where Clinton underperformed, and considering primary turnout, I believe Sanders would have flipped the Rust Belt. He would most likely have outperformed Clinton enough to win close states such as Arizona. While we may never know for sure, I believe the 2016 story would be how much better Trump did than expected, not how he would have won if Sanders had been the nominee. Story 36. Head-to-head polling of Trump versus Sanders is pretty clear. Hillary Clinton barely lost, and she was a poor candidate who did not address the economic issues facing the country. People voted for Donald Trump as a way to break the status quo, which Bernie Sanders did while focusing more on ordinary people. Bernie Sanders would have easily won the election. Story 37. Oh, 100%. I can't find the map, but Bernie Sanders had the highest level of support nationwide. Donald Trump carried Texas. Hillary Clinton carried New York. Sanders had the majority of support in every other state. The only reason he did not get nominated by the Democratic National Committee was that Hillary Clinton was more popular among party insiders. He, however, had the support of the people. Story 38. I doubt it. He would have been a great president, but he only appeared to be a stronger candidate because he was not targeted like Hillary was. The right's propaganda machine is huge and does not care about truth, only results. I recall someone from the Trump campaign saying they had just as big a file on Bernie as on Hillary, but they never needed to use it because he was not a serious threat. Story 39. Laughing out loud. Fox News would have half the country believing he was the Antichrist. Story 40. They accuse Democrats of being socialists all the time to scare middle America. In his case, they wouldn't have to lie about it. Story 41. Sanders generated a great deal of excitement. Young men were especially enthusiastic. I believe he would have motivated many young people to vote and would have won. Story 42. Bernie is primarily an online hero. The real world is not as into him. Story 43. Honestly, he couldn't win the primary in 2016 or 2020. It was a blowout not because of a Make America Great Again style conspiracy or a rigged election, but because voters rejected him. He also lost when he ran for governor. The Democrats lose because he ties them to socialism, or portrays them as too left, even though his voting record is not that progressive. We then lose to a conservative, and some say we lost because we were not left enough. He turned off many Democratic voters with his history of supporting the gun industry. Let this go at some point. Story 44. I have said for a long time that there was zero chance he would have beaten Donald Trump. Trump would have immediately painted him as an old, feeble socialist and stepped up the propaganda. I say this as someone who would have voted for Bernie Sanders as well. Story 45. The chances were slim. I'm surprised some commenters are so deluded as to think Sanders had a chance. Story 46. It's basically the same as with Hillary Clinton. People often misunderstand this hypothetical. We only have two major parties, and most people registered with either party vote for that party. So the vast majority of voters are effectively locked in for any given election. If Bernie Sanders became the nominee, most Democrats would vote for him because they are Democrats and vote as much to oppose Republicans as to support their own platform. The only real question is whether Sanders on the ticket would have changed the small margins in several states that allowed Donald Trump to win. I have seen nothing definitive either way. Frankly, the fact that Trump won at all still bothers me. The way he won seems almost like someone was putting their thumb on the scale in just the right states to just the right degree, even though Clinton won the popular vote comfortably. I have no evidence that the 2016 election was rigged, but the results are odd. To think you could definitively say what would have happened with Sanders on the ticket ignores how unusual that election was. Story 47. Trump would have destroyed him. Bernie has some die-hard fans, but he is too eccentric and radical for most people. Story 48. Oh my God. Can we stop with the ancient men? I want a president whose hip won't break. I promise there are progressive men who are not 1,000 years old. Story 49. He would have performed worse than Clinton did. The general populace was not ready for his vision of what the country could be. It probably still is not, though it is closer now than it was 10 years ago. Story 50. I need anyone who believes they would have won to explain very clearly which states would flip and why. Story 51. Bernie has never had a serious chance of becoming president. He is Jewish and a democratic socialist. As much as I would love to see it, I grew up in Hicksville and know my fellow Americans. Whether mainstream Republican, Tea Party, or supporters of Make America Great Again, they vote the same. It was never going to happen. Story 52. Almost zero. Bernie never could have won against the Fox and Trump machine. Story 53. Bernie had a 0% chance of defeating Trump. Anything else is sophistry and bullshit. Story 54. I made phone calls and drove voters for Bernie Sanders' campaign. People in Texas who voted for Donald Trump loved him. People in Michigan and other Rust Belt states liked him, and rural Oregonians flipped from Bernie Sanders to Donald Trump. Many people here had no clue. Bernie Sanders was anti-establishment, criticized the Democratic Party, supported workers, and inspired young voters. Many people forget how much rural Americans loathe Hillary Clinton. Story 55. Bernie Sanders was not popular among most Democrats. His support was mainly among young people. Story 56. No, I don't think he would have won the general election. A blind spot for many people is that Republicans expected Hillary Clinton to be the nominee, so they did not really attack Bernie Sanders. They expressed bad faith support to pour gasoline on the acrimony between the liberal and progressive wings of the left. The media did not bash Sanders much. All eyes were on Clinton. A lot of people based Sanders' popularity on polls conducted without a major smear campaign by the right. A common joke during the 2016 election was, anybody else 2016. The general consensus was that people hated both Trump and Clinton, which we now know was false. Compared to those two controversial mainstream candidates, the relatively unknown blank slate politician had a more favorable standing. If Sanders had won the nomination, the right-wing propaganda machine would have come down on him with everything they had. They had many smears locked and loaded in case he became the nominee. The common defense is that those smears would not have worked because Republicans call Democrats socialists all the time, so Democrats should just embrace the label and it would lose power. But two things argue against that. First, these are the people who shamelessly smeared war hero John Kerry about his war record and cast doubt on his Purple Hearts. That is where the term swift boating comes from. Second, socialism was not as popular then as it is now. Even now it is more popular with younger generations, but it remains controversial with older demographics, and older people vote at higher rates. There is no telling how swing states would have reacted. Venezuela, a socialist country at the time, was going through a terrible economic crisis. I can easily imagine attack ads showing footage of the destitute situation in Venezuela while a narrator says, Venezuela is on the verge of collapse because of socialism, and now Bernie Sanders wants America to follow their steps. The truth is more complicated, but what gets more traction in an election? A long-winded, detailed explanation about economic intricacies, or a simple tagline like, Bernie is a socialist. Venezuela is a socialist country. Bernie wants to make America like Venezuela? Presidential elections tend to reduce candidates to caricatures. 2008. Barack Obama, charismatic, hope and change. John McCain, old, grumpy war hawk. 2012. Barack Obama, flawed but still charismatic. Mitt Romney, rich elitist. 2016. Hillary Clinton, nagging, corrupt. Donald Trump, rich, non-politically correct billionaire outsider. I think late-night shows, pundits, and comedians would have characterized Sanders as the old slacker moocher. They would have hammered that he had been in politics for 30 years and had not achieved major successes. He would not have fit the outsider narrative, he had not run a profitable business, and critics would have said he wanted to raise taxes on everyone. The contrast would have been framed as a successful billionaire television personality with an attractive spouse and successful children who wants to make the economy run like a business, versus the old, bug-eyed senator with an unattractive spouse who wants to raise everyone's taxes. Given the 2016 context, I think most people would have voted for Trump, because that was before anyone knew how he would govern. A Newsweek article discusses these myths in more detail. If Sanders had won the presidency, he still would have had to deal with Congress and then the coronavirus pandemic. Imagine how much the right would have weaponized the coronavirus against Sanders and socialism in general. I believe that even if he had won, he likely would have been a one-term president. Story 57-0. There's no way he would have won. Trump would just keep implying or saying outright that Sanders is a communist Jew, and people would believe it. Story 58. Some absolutely insane takes in this thread. Huffing copium does not actually rewrite reality. The answer to the question is very simple. 0%. Story 59. Hillary Clinton likely would have won if the Federal Bureau of Investigation had not announced the investigation 3 days earlier. Story 60. It's honestly hard to say. A lot of his support was online, and he did not have the same backing outside the chronically online community. My parents, who were hardline Republicans, were disappointed that they could not vote for him over Trump. They ended up not voting because they did not like Democrats but would have voted for him. I think what makes it unclear is how frustrating some Bernie supporters could be. Story 61. Trump had very effective propaganda. Lies and Willie Horton-type racist fear-mongering won the day in 2016. Story 62. I honestly do not think he would have won. He was very popular with millennials and younger people, but I do not know that he had enough support from older generations. I do think he would have done better than Hillary, at least. Story 63. Not good. Comey would have fucked him too if he had been close. In my opinion, he was definitely on the take. Story 64. Should have, could have, would have, but Hillary was ordained to be the nominee and Sanders accepted it. He is what we decry. He has millions of dollars and multiple homes while earning a senator's salary. Story 65. One saying from that election that I think has some truth is that Donald Trump was the only Republican whom Hillary Clinton could lose to, and Hillary Clinton was the only Democrat whom Donald Trump could beat. Story 66. As appealing as looking back and tossing around what if may be when trying to escape the reality of a terrible situation, there is no way to know. All we can do is work to ensure the future is different. Story 67. Sanders had momentum, especially with younger voters and independents. However, he never faced the full general election media machine or Republican Party attack ads. That uncertainty makes it hard to say definitively. Story 68. I can only give my view as a Republican at that time. I was never a supporter of Donald Trump, and I am now a former Republican. The pendulum swung hard to the left when Barack Obama was elected, at least from a Republican perspective. It was destined to swing back equally, if not harder, to the right. Now it is going to swing back hard to the left, as we are seeing with Mamdani. Story 69. It is amazing how far socialism has come in the Democratic Party. Well done, comrades. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.